Hey there, in this video we will cover the bind function in JavaScript, how we can write and execute the bind method in JavaScript, what is the role of this keyword inside the bind method, what are the practical use cases of bind function, and how we can able to write the polyfill of bind function. So let's get started. So let's create one simple object. So I have created one fruit object and which contains the one property, name property, and similarly I will create one function, simple function, which would return the one string. Okay, so I have added this dot name keyword here. So we will check the role of this keyword later on in this print name function. So suppose now we want to run this print name function from the context of this fruit object, but let's first call this function print name and console it. So as you can see, this is the output. So here this dot name is not printing anything. So suppose now we want to print apple, we want to print the name property of this fruit object. So we want this keyword refer to this fruit object, and so this will print the name property of this fruit object. So let's do one thing. So here bind function help us. So what we will do, we will bind the fruit object to the print name function. So this so what bind function do here? So the bind function creates the new function after binding the context of fruit object to the print name. So context of fruit object means, so this keyword is now pointing to the fruit object. Okay, so when we print this bind function, so this will return us the new function. So now we can store this function in any variable like new print name. Okay, so now what exactly we have done, we have created the one new function which combine the behavior of this fruit object inside the print name function. So now we can use this new print function in anywhere in our code in future. So when we call this function, so you will check the output is apple is fruit, so this apple is pointing to this fruit object. Let's take one more example. So now we will cut this function and make it as a method of this object, and as for now comment this line. And so now we will create one new object which is fruit2 and whose name is mango. So now, so suppose now we want to use this print name method to print the name of the fruit2 object. So here we can also use the bind method. So now we can again call the print name method by calling the fruit object and pass the fruit2 as a argument to the bind function. So now when we run this code, so this will print the mango as a fruit. Okay, so now let's take the code to the one more nested level. So now we will pass the one argument to the bind function, that is name, and we will pass the name to the print name, and we can pass as many as argument to this bind function like this way. So now as you check again, the output is same, but this time we have passed the argument to the new print function using the bind method. So now let's move to the next part, so which is a role of this keyword inside the bind function. So this keyword inside the bind function provide us the ability to get the context of current selected object. So now the current selected object is fruit2. So I repeat it again. So this keyword provide us the ability to find the reference of current selected object. So let's take one quicker look. So if we use this keyword outside the method, so like in this way, so when I console just this keyword, so what would be the output? You can stop the video and guess it. So right, so the output is window object. So window is the global object on the browser. So this keyword points to the window object when declaring outside the method of an object. So as for now, we will cover this keyword in detail later on. So but as for now, think of it as the current reference to current selected object. Now let's move to the practical use case of bind method. So let's create two objects. One is fruit1 and other one is fruit2, and copy the same method. Let me copy the same method to the fruit2, and let me remove the name argument as for now. So now as you can see, we have two objects, one is fruit1 and second is fruit2, and inside the function declaration we have the same method in both the objects. So we have same, let me remove this. So we have same this dot name referring to attributes of an object in both the methods. So let's do one thing. So now we are already referring the fruit1 dot print name dot bind to the fruit2. So now what we are doing, we are passing the context of fruit2 object to the print name function of fruit1 object. So now when we run this method, so now it would create one new function by creating fruit2 object on the fruit1 print name method. So when we execute this code, so you can see the output is according to the fruit2's name attributes. So here what exactly we have found, so we can borrow the method from one object to the another object by using bind function. So this is one of the practical use case. Whenever you want to borrow the method from one object and want to use the context of another object, then we can use the bind method. Now let's move to the second application of bind method. So bind method is also very helpful in asynchronous code execution. So let's take a quicker look. So let's move the second object, this part also, this one also. Okay, so let me remove this one. So let's take one simple async function, set timeout default function. So it takes one callback function as a argument, first argument, and second one as the amount of time to execute that code. So what exactly set timeout function do? Set timeout function will execute the code after some amount of time, like 1000 milliseconds. So let's pass here our object method like this way. Okay, so as for now, let me console it. Okay, so now when you execute this code, you will find there is nothing to print. So this keyword here do not get any reference from the current context where it has declared. So now here bind function comes in rescue. So bind function, so we can bind here using the context of fruit1 object. Okay, so now when we execute this function, this will provide us the required output. So we have checked we can use the bind method to pass the context of this reference in the asynchronous code. So as for now we have seen, we can use the bind method in a synchronous code execution. We can also use the bind method when we have the situation where we have different object like o1, o2, so on up to on, and we want to execute the method of one object in the context of any other object. So these are the two practical use cases we had seen for the bind method. Now let's write the polyfill for the bind function. So why do we need polyfill? So polyfill, sometime it is difficult for the bind method to execute on the older browser. So we need our own method which can execute the same functionality and run in the same way as the bind method works. So let's write the polyfill for the bind method, or let's write our own function for the bind method. So this is the challenging task, so let's try it. So first of all we will add the function name in the prototype. So let's assume custom bind is the new function name for the bind method. Okay, so here what I have done, I have added the custom bind function to the function prototype. Now when you execute the custom bind after the function name, then it would, and then JS engine would recognize the custom bind name. Okay, so the next step, let's try next step. So the next step is, so the bind function returns the new function, so we will return the new function from this bind function. Okay, and after that we need one object to pass in the custom bind function. So let's pass the object to the custom bind function, and okay, so just assume inside this prototype of custom bind function we need the scope of this method to execute the content of this method. So we need the reference to this print name method. So let's as for now let's print this keyword for the functional prototype. So first let's execute this custom bind method. So okay, so now if you find this keyword is referencing to the print name function here. Okay, so now store the scope of this keyword in one, because this is referencing to this print name function. This is little complex task, so this is a little confusing one, so but you can pause the video and repeat it again. stored this keyword inside this function. Okay, and now inside, when we execute the new function, then this keyword should call the apply method. So now the apply method do the same thing as done by the bind method, but it would execute as now rather than execution in future. So we will pass the object. Okay, so let's execute this code. So this is the custom bind method which okay, so let's store the content in one function like print function. So now execute this function. As for now, think of it as no argument. Okay, so here the result is apple is fruit. This is the same result that is provided by the by default bind method. Now this bind method is not working as expected, so we need some changes to this custom bind method. There are two special cases. So assume one special case is when we pass the argument to the custom bind function after the context of an object. So like suppose we pass the argument here, so this argument will not recognized by our own bind function. So we need some changes. So let's do our first change. First, let's complete our first special case, that is, so pass the argument to the print name function like this way. Name, assume I just concatenate the name to the console log. Okay, so now we will pass the argument by using spread and rest operators. So these are the new ES6 operator which reference all the remaining argument to one single argument as an array. So here all the arguments passed after obj object copy to one single args variable. So now pass this variable in the apply function in the form of array by copy the value from args variable. So now we can pass as many argument after the fruit one object. So let's run this concept. So as you can see, the argument is appeared in the result. Okay, so now let's move to the second part, which is the second special case. So suppose user wants to pass the argument from our new created print function that we have returned from the custom bind function like this way. Okay, so we need some changes to execute this argument in our custom bind function. So let's pass the value to the print name function. As for now, I'm just concatenating the value. Okay, so now pass the argument to the return function. Let's make it as argument 2, args2. Okay, and let's again make it as a multiple uh, reference to multiple variables by using spread and rest operator, and similarly we will pass these arguments after the args. Okay, so this so by using this approach we are concatenating our args argument with args2 arguments. So it would create one new array by combining the both arguments from the custom bind arguments and as well as the new function arguments. Okay, so now let's execute this one. So the output contains the fruit argument. Okay, now you can use this bind method concepts in your program whenever it needs, and apart from this you can crack any interview question related to the bind method functionality. And so I wish you like my video, so please subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much.